In this guide, we will go over all of the actions the new summoner learns from level 50 to 90 in order. We will go over how each action is meant to be used and when applicable, the recommended way to use it. We will also summarize changes to the rotation at level 60, 70 and 80, and in the summary, we will take time to outline both an opener and general rotation. I will assume you have already seen my guide which covers level 1 to 50, and I will also assume that you are acquainted with abbreviations like GCD, OGCD and weaving. If any of these aspects are not familiar to you, please view the videos in the top right corner. Now then, at level 52, you learn the ability or OGCD Energy Siphon, which is an AoE alternative to Energy Drain, which it replaces on 3 or more targets. At level 54, Ruin 2 permanently upgrades to Ruin 3, which does slightly more damage. This change means that Outburst only beats Ruin 3 on 4 or more targets. On 3 targets, you can choose which one you prefer. Naturally, this also upgrades Ruby, Topaz and Emerald Ruin 2 to their Ruin 3 counterparts, slightly increasing their potencies as well. Gem Outbursts still outperform Gem Ruins on 3 or more targets, so my recommendation is to use Outburst in general on 3 or more targets to make it all less confusing. At level 58, Ether Charge upgrades to Dreadwyrm Trance. This trance replaces Ruin 3 and Outburst with Astral Impulse and Astral Flare respectively. These 2 new spells are instant and do significantly more damage than Ruin and Outburst. Astral Flare, as the AoE option, should be used on 3 or more targets. Aside from this, your rotation is unchanged, aside from using Astral Impulse or Astral Flare repeatedly for the duration of Dreadwyrm Trance, in place of Ruin and Outburst. At level 60, you learn the odd spell Astral Flow. This spell does not do anything on its own and automatically changes on certain occasions. At level 60, during Dreadwyrm Trance, it will change into the ability or OGCD Death Flare, which does a tremendous amount of damage and should be weaved between astral spells. The cooldown means you only get one of them per Dreadwyrm Trance, so as long as you get around to using it in the trance duration, it's good. For this reason, when applicable, you should prioritize Energy Drain and Energy Siphon casts over Death Flare, but Fester and Pain Flare are lower priority, since you have a whole minute to spend those. The only real major change to your rotation since level 50 is the introduction of Dreadwyrm Trance and its Death Flare, so aside from replacing your Ether Charge window with a much more powerful and also easier to use damage window, your rotation is mostly the same. Use Dreadwyrm Trance and prioritize its unique attacks in its attack window, and then make your way through your 3 summons. Next, at level 62, you learn the trait Enhanced Energy Siphon. This enables both Energy Drain and Energy Siphon to grant you further Ruin when they are cast. Further Ruin enables you to use Ruin 4, which is not a direct upgrade of Ruin 3 for some reason. Ruin 4 can only be used once per Energy Drain or Siphon, is instant and does significantly more damage than Ruin 3, and additionally does some AoE damage. This single use of Ruin 4 should be used outside of Dreadwyrm Trance, but otherwise can be used whenever is convenient. Keep in mind the buff only lasts a minute, so you have to find a good time to use it before Energy Drain becomes ready again. The recommended times to use Ruin 4 is either if you suddenly need some extra mobility, which could happen within the Ifrit attunement or while waiting for Dreadwyrm Trance to get ready again. Alternatively, the AoE damage of Ruin 4 means it is a good time to use it when there are multiple targets. If neither of these reasons come up, you can use it for damage at any time outside Dreadwyrm Trance. At level 66, you learn the ability Searing Light. This ability orders your Carbuncle to empower your party, making you and everyone around you do extra damage for a significant amount of time. This ability should be used on cooldown if possible, but be aware that it can only be used when Carbuncle is present. Be aware that if you use Searing Light and then follow up with a summon spell immediately after, then Carbuncle may not manage to cast a buff in time. If this happens, the ability will still go on cooldown, but you won't get the benefit. This is an interaction known as ghosting. For this reason, try to make sure to space a spell between issuing Searing Light and any summon you may want to use. If you want to be extra sure, watch for the buff applying to yourself. At level 70, Dreadwyrm Trance is upgraded to Summon Bahamut. Bahamut will appear and attack your target on his own for the duration of the summon, which means Carbuncle is not present. Aside from that, you continue to have access to the astral spells. You also get access to the ability Rekindle Bahamut, which orders Bahamut to cast Arcanist on your target, which does an enormous amount of damage, including AoE damage. In the duration of Summon Bahamut, you have enough time to use Rekindle Bahamut once, and as such, should be prioritized in the same way as Death Flare. Although, due to ghosting concerns, like with Searing Light, you may want to prioritize Rekindle Bahamut higher than Death Flare to make sure it comes out on time. This means your priority for OGCDs now is Energy Drain or Siphon, Rekindle Bahamut, Death Flare, Fester or Pain Flare. At this level, the main additions to your rotation includes the single use of Ruin 4, the raid cooldown Searing Light, and the burst from Rekindle Bahamut. You should try to use Searing Light very early in a fight, and it is okay to delay Summon Bahamut a single GCD to make this happen consistently. Ruin 4 can also be used early, but it is also good to keep it around for an AoE damage opportunity or movement, since it does work as a replacement for Ruin 3, but with added mobility. At level 72, you learn the trait Ruin Mastery 3. This trait replaces the Gem Ruins with Ruby Rite, Topaz Rite, and Emerald Rite. Aside from different animations, as well as higher potencies, these new actions are used in the exact same way as Ruby, Topaz, and Emerald Ruin. Despite this, Gem Outbursts should still be used on 3 or more targets, so your rotation is completely unchanged. At level 74, Outburst permanently upgrades to Tri-Disaster, which increases its damage. This damage increase means you should use Tri-Disaster over Ruin 3 on 3 or more targets. Additionally, this upgrades Ruby, Topaz, and Emerald Outburst to Ruby, Topaz, and Emerald Disaster, slightly boosting their potencies as well. At level 80, you learn the spell Summon Phoenix, which replaces Summon Bahamut on every second cast. When you use Summon Phoenix, Rekindle Bahamut turns into Rekindle Phoenix, which does exactly the same thing. Phoenix will also attack your target on its own for its duration, just like Bahamut. Additionally, summoning Phoenix also applies a significant heal over time effect called Everlasting Flight on you and your raid. Astral Flow, instead of Death Flare, turns into Rekindle, which is a decent heal that applies a buff to the target. If the target falls under half health, or the effect ends by duration, it turns into a surprisingly strong heal over time effect. You should find time to use Rekindle in every Phoenix use, even if you just use it on yourself. Often, it could be beneficial to your raid to use it on the tank. In fact, if you have no reason to use it on yourself, your default action should be to target the tank and pass the effect to them. Your tanks and healers will appreciate it. Finally, during Summon Phoenix, Ruin 3 and Tri-Disaster turns into Fountain of Fire and Brand of Purgatory respectively, which are fire versions of the astral spells and should be used in exactly the same way. Nothing major changes for the summoner since level 70, aside from some potencies and visuals. The only exception being Rekindle and Everlasting Flight from Phoenix, so your rotation is mostly completely unchanged. Rekindle can be prioritized like Death Flare, but as long as you use it in the window of opportunity, then that is good enough. You may find it easier to use Rekindle without messing up your rotation by single weaving it, so you have an easier time switching targets in time. At level 82, you learn the trait Outburst Mastery 2. This trait upgrades Ruby, Topaz, and Emerald Disaster to Ruby, Topaz, and Emerald Catastrophe. Once again, while this changes their animations and potencies, it does not change the way you use them at all. At level 84, you learn the trait Ruin Mastery 4, which simply adds extra potency to Ruin 3 and your 3 rites. This does not change your rotation in any way at all, either. At level 86, you learn the trait Elemental Mastery. This trait adds an extra effect to each of your 3 primal summons, which allows them to grant you their favor in some way. When you use Summon Ifrit, he grants you Ifrit's favor. This turns Astral Flow into Crimson Cyclone, which is an instant cast spell that does a significant amount of damage with an AoE component. It also moves you to your target's location. It then immediately turns into Crimson Strike as a combo action. Crimson Strike does the damage again, but requires you to be in melee range of the target. Keep in mind that if you use any other spell after Crimson Cyclone other than Crimson Strike, you lose the opportunity to use the combo action, so make sure to use them together. You should find time to use both of these attacks before moving on to another Primal. You can also apply Swiftcast while using Crimson Cyclone or Crimson Strike to line up for the first or second Ruby Rite, if this is more convenient. When you use Topaz Rite or Topaz Catastrophe, they grant you Titan's Favor, which changes Astral Flow into Mountain Buster, which is an ability with no cooldown that you can follow up immediately after the spell. It is very reminiscent of the Gunbreaker's continuation abilities. Make sure to always add this Mountain Buster attack after each topaz spell, as it adds a significant amount of damage with an included AoE component. When you use Summon Garuda, she grants you Garuda's favor. This turns Astral Flow into Slipstream. This spell has a long cast time and an even longer GCD, meaning that using Swiftcast on it does not save you any time. Slipstream does a good amount of damage immediately with an AoE component and leaves an area in the cast location afterwards, which does damage over time for 12 seconds. It should be noted that even if this area component does not do any damage at all, Slipstream's immediate damage is still worth it over casting, say, Ruin 3. At the time of making this guide, Slipstream has a weird interaction wherein the area it leaves behind is placed at the location of your target at the start of the cast, while the spell attack does the upfront damage at the target's current location. You cannot do much about this strange interaction, but knowing means you can adjust around it. Also at the time of making this guide, it is preferred to use Titan first for openers due to its higher damage potential. For very short damage buffs, you can benefit from both prioritizing Garuda and using Swiftcast on Garuda's Slipstream due to its higher individual potency, although this is a very specific optimization that you may need to adjust to on a per fight basis, and only really is important at the highest levels of play. At level 88, your Radiant Aegis gets an extra charge. This does mean you can be much more free with your use of the shield, since you can always have an extra one. Remember that if you need a shield in 15 seconds, but Bahamut is coming up in 3, then you won't have Carbuncle to cast it in time. This way, using Radiant Aegis early can be convenient. For learning new fights, using Radiant Aegis when you have 2 charges anyway can be beneficial to protect you from unexpected attacks. At level 90, you learn the trait Ascended Summoning. This upgrades your 3 Primal summons to Summon Ifrit 2, Summon Titan 2, and Summon Garuda 2. This improves the damage of their entrance attacks and makes the area of effect of their attacks always be a circle centered on the target, as well as removing any traveling they might need to do in the cases of Ifrit and Titan. This does not change how you use them in any way. This leads us to the summary. Let's cover first an opener, then single target rotation, any AoE adjustments, and then finally considering stat priorities. Keep in mind that openers in the optimal circumstances sometimes may be adjusted based on your team composition, so this particular opener may be good, but your group composition may mean that a different one is superior. Outside of the hardest content, this opener should serve you perfectly with no adjustments. Opener example, solo with no burst potion. Precast Ruin 3 about 1.5 seconds before pull, and then weave Searing Light. Cast Ruin 3, weave Energy Drain. Cast Summon Bahamut, weaving both Rekindle Bahamut and Death Flare. Cast Astral Impulse, weaving Fester. Cast Astral Impulse again and weave Fester again. Then you cast Astral Impulse 4 more times. After this, the recommended path is to summon Titan first, then Garuda, leading with the Slipstream and then using the rights, and then finishing with Ifrit. As soon as Bahamut leaves, you can use any opportune time to use Ruin 4 as long as it happens before Energy Drain is ready again. In a coordinated raid group, you are likely to use Tinctures, potions that boost your damage considerably for a while. If this is the case, you may benefit from delaying all the OGCD attacks, Energy Drain, Rekindle, Death Flare, Fester until after the Tincture, which, by the way, is recommended to be used after the first Astral Impulse. Tinctures take a while to resolve, so don't pair any other OGCDs alongside a Tincture usage. After that, you can safely use the OGCDs in the same order as I stated before. When using a Tincture, you should consider using Swiftcast alongside Garuda's Slipstream to make sure it finishes during the Tincture buff. For general rotation tips, I would recommend prioritizing Searing Light very high since your entire raid benefits from it. But at the same time, Carbuncle is only present at specific times, so if you choose to skip Searing Light at the wrong time, then it might be a while before I get another opportunity to use it. To be exact, Carbuncle is away for the entirety of Bahamut and Phoenix, and is away for a good 6 or so seconds after any Primal summon, so that amounts to more than 50% of the time. After this, you should always use Summon Bahamut or Phoenix as fast as you can when they become available. And then, you should make your way through each of your Primal summons, making sure to spend the attunements as well as favors. Consider if it is beneficial to use Swiftcast for Ruby Ride or Slipstream, or if it is better to keep it for a clutch resurrection. While you do have the ability to use Ruin while being attuned, you should keep in mind that with the duration of Phoenix and Bahamut combined with the attunement uses, you have very few Ruin casts every minute before the sequence start over with Phoenix or Bahamut again. Ruin 4 can be used either before you start your summon Bahamut or Phoenix, between 2 Primal summons, or right at the end of the sequence, while you wait for the next summon Bahamut or Phoenix. Ruin 4 is also a good opportunity to use Searing Light. Given that the Primal attunements have a lot of leeway, you can also use Ruin 4 during a Primal attunement, but this is not necessary. On 3 or more targets, Ruin 3 is replaced by Tri-Disaster, the 3 rights are replaced by their respective catastrophes, Energy Drain is replaced by Energy Siphon, Fester is replaced by Pain Flare, Astral Impulse is replaced by Astral Flare, and Fountain of Fire is replaced by Brand of Purgatory. Aside from this, your rotation is completely unchanged. In regards to stat priorities, this is still early on, but it seems to be a healthy choice to go for a GCD of about 2.48 to 2.46 at the very least, as this makes it much easier to fit all 6 Astral Impulse or Fountain of Fire casts in their respective buff durations. More spell speed is also viable, because Summon Bahamut and Summon Phoenix's cooldowns both scale with spell speed. This will for the most part make your rotations run faster. Critical hit rate focused builds do seem to pull ahead as of the making of this guide however, but this is by a small enough margin that you can do what you find the most fun. Beyond this, I believe at the time of making this guide it is far too early to define what is best. Besides, these kinds of things can change daily depending on what gear sets people find work well, so my best advice here is to seek out people that focus on this aspect of the game. Thank you for watching. If you found anything confusing or have any questions, please leave a comment down below and I will get back to you. Fun fact, with the rework of Summoner, it has gone from one of the jobs with the most buttons to possibly the one with the fewest buttons, only really competing with Warrior and Dancer. The fact that the majority of the Summoner's new buttons as they level up override each other also helps it immensely with ease of use, making it move from one of the most complex jobs to perhaps one of the easiest, although this is of course subjective.